This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. My guest today, Peter Filichia, has spent most of his life writing about theater. He's written reviews and features for a daily newspaper, that was the Star Ledger, a magazine, TheaterWeek, and the Internet. He's written for Playbill, Theatermania, Music Theater International, Broadway Select, Masterworks Broadway and Kritzerland. Peter has authored a number of outstanding books on theater as well, including Let's Put on a Musical, The Biggest Hit of the Season, The Biggest Flop of the Season, Broadway Musical's Most Valuable Players, Strippers, Showgirls, and Sharks, and The Great Parade, the remarkable 1963-64 Broadway season. Peter was president of the Drama Desk Awards from 1992 through 1996 and serves on its current nominating committee. In 2009, he was chosen to be an assessor for the National Endowment for the Arts. Since 1995, he's been critic in residence for the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, the chairman of the Theater World Awards, whose ceremony he annually writes and MCs, and the musical theater assessor for ASCAP's annual awards. On Sunday, most evenings, he can be heard podcasting on Broadway radio. His 10-minute play, Our Dead Classmate, was recently produced by the Camino Real Playhouse in San Juan Capistrano. His one-act play, Games, about bullying, has seen high school productions in all 50 states and 6 foreign countries. His full-length play, Adam's Gifts, A New Christmas Carol, was a finalist for the first Terrence Mcnally Award administered by the Philadelphia Theater Company and has been seen in 6 states. He's performed his one-man show, A Personal History of the American Theater, in many cities and towns in New York and New Jersey, as well as in Aspen, Boston, and St. Louis. And I can tell you I've had the great good fortune to be interviewed by Peter, and now I get to turn the tables a little bit. So it's a real honor for me to have Peter Filichia join me on StoryBeat today. Peter, welcome to the show.
Aren't you nice? Thanks so much.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you on, really. So I know that you're one of the most deeply passionate people that I know regarding the theater. When did the world beyond the footlights first get into your blood?
It was totally accidental. I had no idea when I was growing up that there was even such a thing as live theater. I mean, I'm no kid. I'm 72 years old, and when I was growing up, I just assumed that when movies came in, they stopped doing theater. I mean, after all, when electricity came in, they stopped doing candles. When automobiles came in, they stopped doing horses. So I just assumed when movies came in, they stopped doing plays. Oh, I knew they did them in schools, I mean, because you couldn't drag in all the camera equipment. But I had no idea. And what had happened was I was simply at a neighbor's house, and my parents were visiting, and they said, go into the living room and do something. So I pulled out the soundtrack album to Gigi because I had seen the marquee in a downtown Boston theater. I'm from Boston, as my accent will soon give me away. And I put it on. It was the most important sounding music I had ever heard. I mean, up till this time I was a rock and roll kid, but I mean, this really sounded important to me. So the next one I put on was South Pacific because it was a soundtrack album, and I had seen the marquee in the Boston theater. Same thing, 2 years it was there. How bad could it be? And I loved that too. And the next one I put on was My Fair Lady, which I hadn't seen a movie marquee of, but gee, it was a rather famous property. So anyway, that was one I went crazy for more than any other. So my mother said to me, well, maybe we'll go to New York this year, and you can see My Fair Lady. Now, here's the thing. We had been to New York a number of times.
What year was this, Peter?
1960.
1960, yeah.
I was 14. So anyway, we had been to New York a number of times, and what I noticed every time we were in New York, that movies that played there didn't come to Boston for a few months. Today, of course, everything opens at the same time.
Sure.
But back then, New York got them first. So I just assumed My Fair Lady, the movie, hadn't come to Boston yet. So that summer, we went to New York, and my mother went to a ticket broker to get a ticket. Now, of course, this was the 5th year of the run. You probably was on twofers, and we could have gotten in much cheaper. But anyway, she said to me, "Oh, good, you're in H19, which means you're in the 19th row." And I was very sad because I like to sit close at the movies.
Right.
See, the thing is that in Boston, we did have those roadshow movies, those important movies, Cinerama movies, that type of thing, where you did have to sit in a special seat. So this wasn't surprising to me that high-toned, high-classy New York would mean sitting in a certain seat. So she took me to the theater. I mean, she couldn't afford to go herself because, after all, tickets were $4.40 for an orchestra seat for a Wednesday matinee. Yeah, that much, you know. So, and with the ticket broker fee, it became $5.98. But anyway, she left me off in front of the Mark Hellinger Theater, and I looked up, and I saw the names Michael Allinson and Margot Moser in My Fair Lady. Now, the thing was that, you know, the album I had been listening to was Rex Harrison and Julie Andrews.
Of course.
So I was confused. But then I realized that I had heard on Jack Parr's show that Trevor Howard was doing a remake of Mutiny on the Bounty at that time, and I thought, this is the remake of My Fair Lady. See, this the movie hadn't come to Boston yet, and already classy New York already has the new and improved remake. So I was excited to see this movie. So I went in, they gave me one of these cute little booklets, but that used to happen in Cinerama too. And then I went in, and they didn't put me in the 19th row. They put me in the 8th row, which was really great. They made a mistake, obviously, H19, but I love to sit close to the movies, and maybe I'd get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I open up the cute little booklet, and I see understudies do not perform unless announced, blah, blah, blah. I'm hearing this very strange music from the front of the theater. I mean, it's the musicians tuning up, but I don't know what it is, but it sounds live. And suddenly it occurred to me, wait, is this going to be a real show with people up there? And I remember turning to the elderly woman next to me to ask the question. She even had her veil still on. I can still see her now. And I thought, shut up. At 2 o'clock, you're going to know. Now, a lot of young people I tell the story to say, wait. When you go into a movie theater, I mean, don't you know immediately you're in a movie theater? No, I mean, the movie theaters in Boston were really classy places, so it looked as ornate as anything else. All right, so I figured, don't ask the woman because you're going to be embarrassed. And then suddenly there was a power failure. And I thought, oh, no, I'm going to get back my money. And I'm never going to know because I'm never going to have the nerve to ask anybody. Well, it wasn't a power failure. It was the house lights dimming.
Of course.
You know, so as a result, the overture started, and I thought, well, I guess in New York they actually have live musicians to start the show. And the curtain went up, and there was what I now know to be a scrim, but it was basically white. And I thought, well, this is a classy-looking screen. And I was so disappointed because I thought, I guess it is a movie. And suddenly I was up for seeing real people on stage. And suddenly the scrim was lit from behind. I saw real bodies. I saw an actor waver a bit. You know, it was a Wednesday matinee. He was probably out drinking late last night, Tuesday. And the scrim went up, and my life has never been the same.
So it was like a shot of magic into your veins, yeah?
No question. You know, I spent the whole day with Freeze-On like crazy, surging through my blood because I had never seen anything. And you know, if there were a time machine, I would love to go back and see that performance again because 5 years into the run, I have a feeling it was old, it was tired, it was slow.
Right.
But to me, it was magic.
Well, yeah, because you had nothing to compare it to, so it was
nothing
true
to
magic.
compare it to.
And now, how many times have you seen that particular show?
I think 17, actually,
Wow.
and not that long ago because there's currently a revival in New York.
Right. And who, you know, I'm just curious, who was your favorite of all the Higginses?
Oh, I guess the two that started off for me. Certainly, Michael Allinson will never be surpassed because it was such a revelation. But there's an interesting story involving Margot Moser, who was the leading lady that day, because there's a scene where Eliza comes into Higgins' study for the first time, and she's unkempt and all that. And at one point, she has to blow her nose, but instead what she does is wipe her nose on her sleeve, and Higgins is grossed out. He says, Eliza, use a handkerchief. So he gives her the handkerchief, and what Margot Moser did that day was wipe her nose on her sleeve again and then wipe it off with the handkerchief. Now, that's a good joke. And I was amazed in 1964 when the movie came out that wasn't in there.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a while to realize, I bet she added that. Well, on March 31st, 1993, an easy date to remember because it was the 50th anniversary of Oklahoma,
Right.
Rodgers and Hammerstein had a big party at the Rainbow Room. So I went. And the woman next to me says, "Hi, I'm Margot Moser." I said, "Listen, while I have you here, let me ask you a question." So I asked her about it. She said, "Oh, yeah, I added that in." All right. At that time, I was writing the book you mentioned earlier, Let's Put on a Musical, which is a guide for high schools and community theater about shows they should do, shows they should avoid, what you have to have if you're going to do these shows, that type of thing. And I put this in, that maybe you want to do this production, what Margot Moser did, wipe the handkerchief on your sleeve. Well, about 2 years later, I got a letter from an actress in Vermont who said, "I was auditioning for My Fair Lady, and it was down to two of us. They had me read that scene, and when I did that, they thought I improvised, and they went crazy and gave me the part on the spot." So it turned out to be a very good thing.
That is a very good thing. Did you ever see Harrison do it?
Later in 1981 when he did the revival, and by that point, of course, he was terribly old.
Yes.
And it wasn't that he was so bad or anything like that. What it was, it seemed so sad when Eliza was leaving him that she was leaving an old man.
Yes.
That was another dynamic that didn't happen in 1956.
I saw that when it was on tour with him in L.A. at the Pantages Theater, and he just looked like he wanted to lie down all the time.
I will say there's another thing, too. I did see it here in New York, but before that, I was in Boston one Wednesday afternoon, and I was having lunch with a friend, and I said, "Have you seen the My Fair Lady?" And he said, "No." And I said, look at this. It's 3:30. We're not far from the theater. Maybe we can second act the show. This is very hard to do now, but we weren't above it back then. And so we went to the Wang Theater in Boston, went to the back of the theater, the doors that exited out where people smoked.
Right.
We didn't walk in through the front door because we might get caught. So we went in, and boy, Boston's a great theater town, so the seats were really packed with people. We had to go up to like a third balcony. The Wang Center has 4,400 seats, so we were far away. And what really bothered us, you may remember that Kathleen Nesbitt was in that production,
Yeah.
and she was an old woman. I mean, she was in her 90s.
Wow.
And my God, she moved so well. I was very disappointed at the curtain call that there wasn't a burst of applause for her. I mean, there was applause, of course, but it wasn't the type of excitement you hear when somebody comes on that people really want to recognize. I was very angry at the crowd for not appreciating her. And then I walked through the front of the house, leaving, and I saw the sign saying, "At this performance, the role usually played by Kathleen Nesbitt will be played by whomever." So we were seeing an understudy, but we were so far away we couldn't recognize her as an understudy.
Right. So at what point, I mean, this is you're 14 years old, so you're, in some ways, you're coming to the theater rather late compared to many people who get it when they're, little kids.
Well, that's a matter of interpretation. It's funny, when I was interviewing Zoe Caldwell, and I mentioned that her performance in The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie in 1967
Right.
was the finest performance I've ever seen an actress give, and that's still true these 51 years later.
Wow.
She said, she's a very grand lady, "You saw Jean Brodie? My, you must have been very young." And I thought about it, and I said, "No, actually, I was already 21." And she said, 21 is very young to be going to the theater. So, maybe 14 is old by today's standards, where there are so many kids shows like
Yeah.
Beauty and the Beast
Right.
and SpongeBob, what have you, Aladdin. We got a million of them. But in those days, when I used to go to the theater and spend my $6.50 for orchestra seats in Boston, I was pretty much the youngest person by far in the crowd.
So now you've had this thing seep into your blood, as it did for me when I was a little younger than that, but it was in my blood hard. And when did you first start writing about it? When did you first start becoming a critic, when you thought, I'll do this?
Well, it was the damnedest thing. What had happened was, because I was going to theater and because I was going to a reasonably small high school, our graduating class was 146. I was pretty well known for being somebody who was interested in theater. People used to be very impressed that I would spend the money and go to this high-class adult entertainment. So word spread, and people knew I was doing it. So when I was going to college, I was walking up a flight of stairs one day, and a guy was coming downstairs who was a classmate of mine at the high school. Now we were both at the same college, and he said, "Hey, I just became editor of the school paper. Listen, why don't you write reviews for us?"
Huh.
I had never given it a thought. In fact, I thought critics paid for their tickets. I didn't know how it worked. But I soon learned, and so I started writing for the school paper. And what had happened was there was a publication then in Boston called Boston After Dark. It was just starting out. It was essentially the Village Voice of Boston, or it became the Boston Phoenix, and it lasted for a good long time. But they were just starting out then, so I approached them, and they said, "Yeah, sign on." So that's really how it started, just going up the right set of stairs at the right time.
And at what age were you? You were.
I was 21.
So okay,
yeah, 21.
So you were in college at that time, not high school.
Yeah,
anymore.
indeed.
And,
yeah.
And you suddenly discovered, I can get into shows for free on top of everything else.
Yeah, really. I was astonished. I didn't know that's how it worked. I knew nothing about it. I didn't come from any type of theatrical heritage. Nobody I knew in my family or anybody in the neighborhood or anything like that went to the theater. So, it just wasn't on their radar at all.
Right. And all right, so today, how many shows would you say you go to a year?
Oh, well, I know last year I set a record with 369.
Holy moly.
That's more than one a day.
How do you do that?
Well, there are matinee days out there.
So you're seeing two a day.
Hard to do. The irony is I'm not remotely burned out. I mean, not remotely. I just love going. I love, some people do crossword puzzles, and what I do, I sort of see these things as crossword puzzles, as things to be solved. I don't necessarily mean saying, here's how the show could be better, though I do believe sometimes I do think that's true, which doesn't make me right, but I do think that from time to time. But more to the point, I just like thinking, okay, if I were working on the show, what would I do next? And what makes this good? What makes this bad? Ooh, what a smart move. Ooh, what would have been better here, et cetera, et cetera. So I often come up with ideas. So I find it very innovating to go to these things and come out with opinions or be stymied, sometimes saying, I don't know what I would have done if I were in that position.
Well, at this point, you've seen so many thousands of shows that you've got lots of thoughts in your head as to something that you've seen maybe before that could be adapted in a different way, yeah?
Well, yeah. I mean, for example, I don't much like the show Man of La Mancha because I think the guy's crazy. That's it. I don't see him as optimistic. I'm very optimistic, but enough's enough. You don't look at a Barber's Hell bowl and say it's a golden helmet. I mean, that's where I lose patience with it. But here's my point. I went to see it in Paris. And it was great to see it in Paris because I don't speak French, and therefore I didn't understand the language. And that's great because I don't like what they have to say when they say it in English. So, but anyway, here's what was interesting to me. At the end of the show, Don Quixote, I should say Cervantes, because that's the character. Cervantes finds he's going to get out of prison, and he rushes up the stairs to get the hell out of that hellhole. Well, he forgets the book. And somebody says, "Attende!" And he turns around, and they throw him the book, and he catches it. And you watch Don Quixote, the book, get out of prison as well. So that's terrific. So my point is, even if it's a show that I hate, there's always a possibility there's going to be something that's going to make it memorable. And that was what happened that day. And not only that, what I really thought was clever was the book didn't look like a book. It was a ragtag assemblage of pages, crinkled, wrinkled, tied together with rope. And that's what they were in those days.
Sure.
Every other Man in La Mancha is this charming, looks like it just came off the press book. But that isn't what it was. So again, new things can occur to people, and when they do, I really appreciate them.
Well, that must be what keeps it fresh for you when you have to see a show repeatedly.
Yeah.
How are they doing it differently?
Yeah, indeed. And I always look for that. So that becomes a new adventure in its own way.
Mm-hmm. And do you, you're known for having a virtually encyclopedic memory for theater stuff. Do you have a technique for keeping it all straight, or you just naturally have a great memory?
Well, I don't know. I think my memory is better than most. But to be fair, what I started doing as a kid was keeping a record of what I saw, when I saw it, what I thought of it, and what theater I saw it at. And I've never stopped doing that. And that really helps because sometimes when I have to go and check and see when I saw something, there are all sorts of titles around it that reinforce other memories as well.
Sure.
So I think that book really helps me well, now it's 2 volumes because it's New York and out of town.
Wow.
11,000 shows, that's a lot of entries in a book. But anyway, so I think that helps a lot. But yeah, my fervent interest in it really makes a great deal of difference as well.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of jobs, as we all have in our lives, and I had a wonderful job once being the editor-in-chief of a magazine called The Best Report. And The Best Report meant that I had to go experience the best of everything.
Right.
I had to fly first class. I had to stay in hotel suites. I had to eat in the best restaurants, where I gained 26 pounds, which has not yet remotely come off. But anyway, my point is that every now and then somebody would come in and said, "Where's that picture of whatever?" Where's that picture of that hotel in San Francisco? And I'd say, let me check. Yeah, I'll get back to you. But when I was at the Star-Ledger, and they said, "Where's that picture of that production of Carousel?" I knew exactly where it was because I cared about it.
Right.
So that's what makes the difference. Because I care about it so much, my memory is good.
But well, clearly you have a reference there that you've made for yourself, but you have an astonishing recollection of things as well. I mean, you're proving that right now with all the things you're saying. But that you don't have a trick or anything for that, do you? That's just naturally you.
No, I don't think it's not like a mnemonic device or anything like that. No, it really is just because I'm fervently interested.
Cool. Well, okay. So you've been a critic, obviously, an observer. You've also been a playwright, and you've written for all sorts of different things, including books, etc. Does one of those appeal to you more than the other?
Well, the reviewing is much easier, of course, because it's certainly shorter. And the fact is, like anything else, the more you do it, the more you get good at it. I mean, people who go to the gym tell you it gets easier as time goes on. I wouldn't know. I'm not at the gym. I'm at my computer writing. So, yeah, I mean, I can
your powerlifting words, Peter.
Right, that's it. Because, again, I just do it all the time. I mean, I haven't seen a network TV show or even a cable TV show since the 70s because I do write all the time. I think nothing when I come into the house but going to the computer and doing some writing. So
I think that's
really what I do.
For our listeners, I think that's a really telling and interesting statement you just made, that even after doing it all these years, you've been doing this quite some time, even after all these years, it's still a deep passion for you. It's not a job to you, I guess.
Well, the story I like to tell is that when I was at the Star-Ledger for 1 year to the day, our dance critic came up to me, and said, "So you started a year ago today?" And I said, "Valerie, that's amazing. How do you remember that?" She said, "Well, don't be so impressed. It's my mother's birthday, and I remember being on the phone last year arranging to take her to dinner, and they said, 'Get off the phone, come meet the theater critic.' So she said, 'You've been here a year. You're entitled to a vacation. Are you taking it soon?' I said, 'Yeah, next week.' 'Where you going?' she said, with Europe and the Caribbean in her voice. I said, 'Louisville.' She said, 'Louisville? Oh, no, I get it. Friends, relatives, a wedding.' I said, no. I've never been to Actors Theater of Louisville, and I'm getting embarrassed that I haven't been there. And it's only an hour from Cincinnati. And the thing is that there's a play that a lot of people think is going to win a Pulitzer Prize. So I think I should see it. And funny thing, Carol Channing's going to be there doing Hello, Dolly, so that'll be fun,
wow.
too.
Yes, indeed.
And she said, wait. You mean on your vacation you're going to do the same thing you do every other day of the year? And I said, well, Valerie, I guess that means I'm in the right job, because I don't think there are too many people who on their vacation would do what they do every other day of the year. They would try to escape it, but that's not me. So I think I'm in the right job.
So it's not, it really isn't a job for you. It's your love.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a song in a very obscure 1969 British musical that says when you get paid good money for what you anyhow do for free. And I do understand that. But don't tell the people who pay me that I do it for free.
We'll keep it a big secret.
Good.
So you're also a produced playwright, and you've performed your own one-man show, too. How has being a reviewer affected not only the way you wrote your own plays, but how did you also deal with being the subject of reviewers?
Well, I will admit that the Wall Street Journal had a reviewer review one of my books, and it still stings, which is good for me to experience because, if you dish it out, you have to take it as well, and I understand that. But, I'm a very benign reviewer. I have a very different take on reviewing that most people do, and I'm very influenced by Walter Kerr, who was the critic for the Herald Tribune and then the New York Times,
right.
Who was such a good critic they even named a theater after him,
indeed.
Where Bruce Springsteen has been playing for a while. Well, anyway, I still can see it on the page when he said, "Sometimes I wish the show had been as good as I make it sound the next day when I'm reading my review." And I understand that point of view because, after all, we see everything. We go all the time. And what we have to remember is that with the considerable expense of theater tickets, it's amazing if indeed people even go once a year. The New York League of Theaters says that they've done a survey. A heavy theater goer goes to Broadway 4 times a year. And I bet it's down to 3 now with, premium pricing. So people don't go that often. And when we go all the time, we have to remember that. Now, I'm going to mention a critic, not by name, but something he wrote.
Okay.
He was reviewing a Christmas show one December, and he wrote his review, letters to Santa Claus. He said, "Dear Santa, can we have a moratorium on these Christmas shows? I've been to 4 in the last week, and I'm just so tired of them." And I gave him hell. I said to him, "You should not be writing that. Don't tell us your troubles. This is not what you're supposed to be doing. What your responsibility is to tell what the best things are about those 4 Christmas shows so that people can make a decision on what's good or bad."
Definitely.
So that's what we have to do. And the other thing, too, is I am very much interested in being an audience matchmaker. And what I mean is when I see a show, I don't care if I like it or not. I just want to let it be known to the audience that would like it that they should attend. I mean, for example, I wasn't very enthusiastic about I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change, which started its life in New Jersey. And the Star-Ledger is the big paper in the state, and it gets attention. So as a result, when I went, I saw that the audience was really crazy for it. So I wrote a review saying the audience laughed so much and threw their heads back in laughter so much that today they're all going to have to be fitted with whiplash collars. So the next day, the guy who runs the theater called me and said, "You didn't like it, did you? I can tell." And I said, "No, it wasn't really for me." But, it deals with singles and their problems. And, I've been with the same woman for a long time. So I don't have these problems. I can't relate to it. But, there are people who can. So as a result, why don't those people go to the show? So anyway, he said, no, thank you. We've been faxing your reviews. That's how long ago this was, faxing. We're faxing your review, and a lot of people say, on the basis of the review, we're going to come out and see it. Well, they moved it to New York, and it ran 12 years. So, and I dare say they would have had a tougher time of it if I had said, well, it's silly, it's superficial. That has nothing to do with anything. It's just important that the audience that wants to see a show should be able to see it. And it was true at a show at Crossroads Theater Company in New Brunswick, New Jersey, which is a black theater company. They did a play called Telltale Hearts, nothing to do with Edgar Allan Poe,
right.
But it dealt with young black singles in a bar. Well, I'm not young, I'm not black, I'm not particularly single. I mean, I'm not married, but my girlfriend and I have been together a long time. So I have nothing in common with the play. But, I turned around, I looked at the audience. I always look at the audience. Are the husbands asleep? That's what I want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And if the husbands are awake, that's a good sign. And everybody was having such a good time. So I said, hey, in my review, single people, you got to go to see this show because you're going to see single people making mistakes you've never made, and you're going to feel good about yourself. And I ended the review by saying, and who knows single people? There's an intermission. Who knows who you'll meet in the lobby? You might not be single anymore. They had to expend the play by weeks, and I didn't like it. But that's not the point. It has nothing to do with me. That's the way I feel. And by the way, most critics don't feel this way, but it is the way I feel.
You're really, from my point of view, Peter, you're more of a reviewer than a critic. And
yes, I think that's really true. And the term I like to use more than any other is appraiser because, if you take a dime into 47th Street here in New York, if they're going to tell you if it's good or bad.
Right.
But they're called appraisers. Now, why are they called appraisers and we're called critics, which has a negative feeling to
That's
it?
right.
Appraiser even has the word praise in it. So I mean, as a result, why are we critics and they appraisers?
Well,
I have no answer for that.
So there are, and this too shall be nameless, there's a certain head critic at the New York Times who I don't think is a reviewer. I think he is a critic, and I think that he has a tendency to say a lot of negative things about shows that are not correct. But he's still the head guy there, so that's the way it works, To
be fair, what I will say is that by the time that gentleman writes, or those gentlemen, because there are two now, write their reviews, I too have seen the shows they have seen.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I'm in a position that doesn't come from an unawareness of the show. So as a result, I have to say that many times I think those two guys are really on the money with what they say. It may not be my take on it, but I don't think that they ever make, you should pardon the expression, mistakes. I think they're pretty good, frankly.
Well, they are there for a reason. I'm making a distinction between what you do, which I think helps people, and I think what they do that sometimes actually hurts people. Well,
what's wonderful, and I mean this, what's wonderful is, of course, is that critical influence is waning tremendously because of the Internet. Because
no question.
You should pardon the expression amateur critics, and I only mean amateur in the sense that they're not paid. But a lot of people give their opinions, and they are certainly swaying ticket buying, and I think that's very healthy.
I agree. I think that's true for all of the arts. That's not just the theater. Okay, so you've obviously written about who knows how many hundreds or thousands of stories at this point. What for you makes a good story good?
Are you talking about when I write or when somebody else writes?
Well, either one.
I think
in other words, when you're
else writes,
so when you're looking at a show,
emotionally involved. That's why I don't like reviews of meaning REVUES shows where people come out and sing and dance one song after the other, because there's no emotional content there.
There's no.
The best you can say is, "Boy, can she sing," or "Wow, can he dance," and that is of no interest to me.
There's no through line.
Yeah, I really want a story that engages me. I want to feel something I've never felt before, which is really hard to do, I'll grant you. But I really want to care about the people on stage. I want to identify them, or, for the first time ever, find something in them that I've never thought of, and something that makes me really passionately feel. I mean, for example, I'm not really an animal person. I think animals are cute, but I like looking at them when the people are walking the dogs on the street. I think animals have cute faces and all that. But I'm not an animal person, probably because not one of them has ever laughed at one of my jokes. And, you can't have a good conversation with them. So people are what do it for me. However, the play Warhorse amazed me when I saw it in London, because I really started to care about this horse. This poor horse got into one trouble after another, and I really didn't think he was going to survive. And there I was, really caring about, and it wasn't like it was a real horse. It was a puppet horse, and 4 people were manipulating it. They didn't make any bones about the fact that there were 4 people manipulating. You saw them. They were right out there. But I'm telling you, they made you care about this horse. And it astonished me that I thought my heart would break. Oh, he's never going to get out of this situation. Oh, my God, he's in barbed wire. How the hell is he going to get out? And that was really an amazing thing for me to have that experience. So that's what I want. I want to really be able to care about the people on stage and really empathize in a way that I had not known I could empathize before.
Did you feel the same way with the puppets in Avenue Q?
Well, that, of course, has a different slant, and I had a wonderful time with the puppets in Avenue Q, and I certainly admired the writing, and I was a big champion of Avenue Q when it came out, and still am. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful show, and I had a great time at it. But I'm not sure that I really felt the same type of emotional connection, but that was certainly entertaining. It was smart. It went in a direction that nobody had thought of before, and that's what I really love when people people come up with something that nobody has ever thought of before. Who would think that these puppet characters from Sesame Street, thinly veiled, but of course Sesame Street was what they had in mind, could have these other lives that we were not allowed to see on Sesame Street for obvious reasons. You know, that they were, even though they were puppets, they had flesh and blood emotions, and that was really very good. So I'm not surprised that the show is still running after all these years, and I'm delighted it is.
It's a very good show. There's no question about it. So do you feel the same in terms of it has to be an emotional connection for you and a performer and a performance, or is there something different that you can recognize as being this is outstanding or not? Does it all have to do with emotion, or is there something else you're looking at?
Well, I mean, there certainly are actors who are technically proficient, and that's fun to watch, even if they don't get to the heart and soul of a character, that they have certain moves. But I will say, as time goes on, I get less and less impressed by that. I would like to see some of the performances I saw way back when. The first pre-Broadway tryout I ever saw, when I was 15 years old, at the Colonial Theater in Boston, was I Can Get It For You Wholesale, and I came out raving about this actress named Barbara Streisand.
Right.
I mean, I thought she was terrific. And when the album came out, I said to everybody in the neighborhood, you got to hear this. It's going to, you won't believe how great she is. And 14 kids in my bedroom, and they all hated her, and I was a pariah in the neighborhood, you know, and mocked. And years later, when I went to Madison Square Garden and saw people paying $3.50 a ticket, which was a lot of money then, and saw 18,000 people, I thought, hey, Donnie Mahoney, Jeffrey Bates, Dickie Tompkins, who was right? But here's my point. I have been told that Streisand really laid it on thick, and I wouldn't be surprised if now I wouldn't be as taken with that performance as I was then. I've noticed when I've taken people to the theater who rarely go, they like the over-the-top performances, partly because in their own lives they can't be over-the-top, that they're somewhat hemmed in by conventions, religion, what have you, and they like when people go all out. And that only goes so far with me now. So in that way, I've changed tremendously in admiring over-the-top performances.
I think a lot of people go to the theater in order to live vicariously through some other character.
No question about that. Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And of course, that's true of any art form, too, which is why art is so powerful, because we really do get ideas from what happens in theater and movies and all the rest of them. I mean, I've had so many profound experiences that I wouldn't expect to have. One of them actually was at a movie, but I went to it because it was the movie A Flower Drum Song. This is when it first came out, and there I was in the front row. I love sitting close at the movies. I was at the front row of the RKO Theater in downtown Boston, and afterwards, two guys came in and sat behind me. I didn't see them, but I heard them come in, and what was so wonderful was the fact that we had the same sense of humor. Every joke, we tended to begin laughing and end laughing at the exact same point. I mean, they really were my soulmates, and when the movie ended, I turned around and I was amazed to see that they were black men. Now, I grew up in a completely white neighborhood. I never knew a black person up until this point. And while the nuns in my Catholic high school said, we're all the same, and I'm not sure they even believed it, the point is that that was the day when I learned it was true. And what's really interesting, there was a white guy, two black guys, enjoying a movie about Asians. I mean, a triple crown, you know? So it was really great, you know, to have that experience. So, even better, some years ago, I was doing a book on baseball, believe it or not, and I was going up to Cooperstown to the Hall of Fame, and I was driving through Albany, and suddenly I saw a big billboard while I was stopped at a light saying The Wiz, June 28th, 29th, 30th, 8 p.m., Washington Park, and there was an arrow, and I thought, well, it's 10 of 8. Why don't I go? You know, I'm here, you know, why not? So I got there, and the only seat that I could get, which was fine with me, was in the front row, because they never put critics in the front row, because you take notes, and the actor's on stage saying, oh, my God, he's writing about me, he hates me. You know, you could be writing, this is the greatest performance I've ever seen, but you know, actors think you're criticizing them. So anyway, I'm in the front row, and what I notice is that to the left of me is an entire line of very elderly people who are sleeping, and the show hasn't begun yet. And the thing is, you know, I figured out this was like a senior citizen center where they bust out the people to give them a night on the town. To the right of me was a little baby in a baby carriage looking up at his parents, looking very concerned. And the young man, the father, and the young woman, the mother, were not talking to each other. Both of them had their arms crossed, and they were angry with each other. And I knew what had happened. Honey, I want to go see The Wiz tonight. I ain't going to see no Wiz. What are you talking about? No, really. I want to see the show. I think it'll be great. You know, no, it's free. There's no reason why we can't go. I'm not going. But come on, it's a nice night. It's out. I'm not going. There's no reason why you can't. All right. all right, I'm going. Get your hat. Let's go. So they weren't speaking to each other. All right. So the show starts, and the guy, of course, the Wiz, to him means the Wizard of Oz, and he thinks he's going to hear because. But this is the black version of Wizard of Oz. And suddenly he's saying, hey, this is all right. And, of course, the woman now is furious with him because, he ruined the night for her already, and now he's having a good time, which makes her time even worse.
Of course.
Meanwhile, to the left of me, the woman right next to me has awakened, and she hasn't thought about the Wizard of Oz since she saw it in the real movie theater in 1939. And it's coming back to her. Oh, yeah, the Scarecrow. Oh, yeah, the Cowardly Lion. Oh, yeah. And the thing is that I don't find the Wiz funny. I don't think the jokes are funny. So when a joke happened, I didn't laugh, but they did laugh. And the thing is, you may be this type of theater goer, that plenty of people are, that when you go with the theater with somebody, you share the laugh by turning to the person and smiling at that person and acknowledging the laugh. So she turned to me, and I'm not laughing. And he can't turn to the wife because she hates him. She's filing divorce papers as soon as they get home. So as a result, I have this old, wizened, white woman's face in front of me and this young black man's face in front of me, and they have the exact same smiles as they're enjoying the joke. Now, if they were walking down the street, if she were approaching him and he approaching her, they would not say a word to each other.
Sure.
She might even be scared of him, I hate to say, but it's true. And here they were. Art brings people together. Art connects, and that's one of the best things that has ever happened to me in all these years of theater going, seeing that happen.
That's a great story. So I want to dig into your actual process a little bit. That is to say, okay, so do you have a routine? Do you have a writing routine? Do you have anything that you do every day the exact same way, or does it change up constantly?
Well, I tell you, I take notes like crazy when I'm at a show.
How do you do that in the dark?
It's hard. Sometimes you write over what you're writing. I mean, it happened last week. I called my girlfriend and said, listen, do you remember what the guy said? And, blah, 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 and she said, no, I don't remember. And I said, because I wrote over it. And, when it's really important, I write it in capital letters. Otherwise, I just write in cursive. But this was important, and yet it was so dark that I wrote over it. That's why it's really important to put critics close up. Not necessarily the first row, but close because of the light from the stage. And then with a dark show where there's very little lighting, you're in trouble. But you do the best you can. But what I've noticed is the next morning when I look to write the review, there are plenty of things that I would have forgotten had I not written them down. Plenty of things. And that's why it's important to write them down. A woman once wrote into the New York Times saying, I am so upset. I paid all this money for tickets, and I was sitting next to a guy taking notes like crazy. And I thought, well, maybe it could have been me because I do it all the time. So then what I do is I simply come home and I transcribe my notes. And then I just keep reading over and over and over again. Somehow sentences link, and sometimes if I don't have an idea for a lead, how you start, one occurs to me. But often, as I say, capital letters are in that notes because I have indeed found the lead while I'm watching the show. I mean, for example, recently I saw a production of Arms and the Man, the George Bernard Shaw play, done by a college group. And George Bernard Shaw said, youth is wasted on the young.
Yes.
Well, not in this case, because these young people were terrific in the play. So I knew I had the way I was going to start the review, which was really great. Often I don't, but as I say, if you just keep on going up and down and up and down and up and down that computer file, you'll eventually come up with something, and eventually it all links together.
So you're sitting there in the dark with what, a little reporter's notebook or a big pad, or how do you do it?
No, I use a Sharpie, and I just write over the back pages of the Playbill where there's either the ads for the shows that are currently playing or the bios of people. I always ask for a second Playbill. So I use one for notes and then one to keep for reference purposes as the years go on. They turn out to be very valuable, those Playbills from years back, when you're dealing with a celebrity that you have to interview. For example, I have a program, not that I saw it, somebody gave it to me, when Bernadette Peters was a child doing Gypsy. And she was playing Baby June, or Dainty June, I don't remember, it must have been Dainty June, who's the older of the characters, June, who disappears after the first act. But what had happened was, in the second act, they also have a group of girls called the Toreadorables, and one of the girls got sick during intermission, so Bernadette Peters had to play that part in the second act, which is kind of interesting if you know Gypsy, because the idea of Rose casting somebody who looks like June is a very interesting thing. But anyway, having that story and going into an interview with Bernadette Peters and starting with that was a great way to, because she knows you're paying attention. She knows you're not asking the same question she's heard a million times. So sometimes those old playbills can really help you out.
Do you find reviewing to be a form of storytelling in and of itself?
Oh, yeah. I could be aggrandizing myself or blowing my own horn, but I think I'm really good at summarizing a story in a very few lines.
I know for a fact that you are. You're very good at it.
So anyway, but again, that comes just with experience and time and all the rest that goes with it.
At what point after you started writing this, way back in your 20s, how long did it take before you thought to yourself, you know what, I'm not too bad at this? Right away, or did it take a while?
I guess the answer to that question has to be you think you're good right away and you may not be. I mean, when I was 15 years old, I thought I knew everything about theater.
Who doesn't?
And now that I'm in my 70s, I know comparatively little about theater.
Absolutely.
So, which means I've acquired some wisdom along the way. So I guess it's always a case of starting off thinking you're terrific, and then as time goes on, and you read other people and you say, ooh, that didn't occur to me. Oh, yeah, I see that person's point.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the more you look into this, like every other field in the history of mankind, the more you'll learn.
So you've assembled your notes. You've gone through your. I'm absolutely fascinated that you write your notes in a playbill, but nevertheless, you've gone home. You've started to assemble your notes, and you've written at least a pass. How many drafts typically do you write before you're good to go?
I don't know how many drafts it really comes down to, but I will say that it takes, I would say, about 4 hours to do it right. Though, there's that famous expression that work takes as long as you have the time to do it.
Sure.
And I remember one time I came back from the paper after seeing a matinee of Romeo and Juliet in Montclair, New Jersey, and they said, look, a story fell through. You got to get this review written in an hour. And it got done in an hour. Thank God Montclair is right next to the town in New Jersey called Verona. So that was an easy way to start the review. Well, we're not quite in Verona, but we're in Montclair, blah, blah, blah. But it got done in an hour because it had to be done. So, I mean, really, that famous expression does apply.
Did you work at, when you were at the Star Ledger, was it the kind of thing where you'd see a show and go back to the office and write it for that night for the deadline?
Not quite. I will say on weekends, and New Jersey theater certainly is weekend-centric, if I saw a show on a Friday night, I would go back to the paper and write it then so that it could be in Monday's paper because the weekend staff wanted it in for Monday, and I did it right away. But, you really got to admire these old-timers who did it when they used to have to do it on typewriters.
Yeah.
And they used to rush out of the theater. I mean, openings used to be like at 6:30 just to accommodate the critics so that they could go back to their newspapers and type. I mean, there's a book called The Season, which is about Broadway's 1967-68 season, and William Goldman, who wrote the book, came down very hard on Clive Barnes for writing a review that seemed to contradict itself, that he said good things at the beginning of the review and bad things at the end, or vice versa. But he contradicted himself, and Goldman actually told you the sentences in the review, and you could see that he did contradict himself. Mm-hmm. Well, some years later, I was on a panel with Clive Barnes, and I'm not sure he was quite referring to this, but he might very well have been when he said, in those days, they were waiting for us to do the beginning of the review so they could put it on the page that they wanted to set in type right then and there, and then it would say continued on page whatever. So I had to give them the stuff right away, and then, I had to finish the review. So as a result, it's very possible that he had forgotten what he had written or contradicted himself because of that. So those guys are my heroes for having to do it on the spot. Now what happens is because there are so many investors in Broadway shows, everybody wants to go to opening nights. So as a result, opening nights really are rarely attended by critics. We usually go to one of 4 previews. They give us 4 dates and we choose the one we want. And then we have ample time to think about it and write reviews. And, I think this is very healthy because, after a night's sleep and a shower, suddenly you're not as angry as you might have been the bad show that you would have been otherwise.
Do you ever get, you've already said that you've had producers call you after a review comes out. Have you ever gone back and corrected anything?
Well, I will say this. When I first saw Smokey Joe's Cafe, I didn't much like it. Again, as I said, a review, one song after the other. And considering this was the story of Lieber and Stoller, who were white men who were writing in a black idiom, I just thought, what was it like when you showed up at offices and people were expecting two black guys and it turned out to be two white guys? Mm-hmm. That struck me as an interesting thing. And maybe that wouldn't be enough for a show. But anyway, I didn't like Smokey Joe's Cafe, and I referred to it as putrid. Ooh. Well, when it hit its 1500th performance, I wrote a retraction, in essence, saying, look, obviously there's a public for this, and good luck to them, because I really didn't think the show was going to go. And it did get a great boost from the Tony Awards because it had a dynamic opening for the Tony Awards, and that's what started selling tickets. Mm-hmm. It wasn't doing well, but the Tonys really helped it, and, it's the best infomercial the theater can have is the Tonys. I'm not, if I, quote unquote, and take the word as however you want to, make a mistake, mm-hmm. I certainly do own up to it because I think it's important. And I very much admire Frank Rich in his book Ghostlight, where he prints his reviews at the back of the book, says things I overestimated and things I underestimated, things I got right, things I got wrong. It's very sad when you have millions of dollars riding on a project and somebody gets it wrong and admits it later. I mean, it doesn't do the show any good then. Nope. Usually they're long closed by then. But anyway, all we can do is the best we can.
Well, I'm a little off topic going on myself for half a second, but I had something to do with a show called Jekyll and Hyde, mm-hmm. and when it opened, there were pretty much zero positive reviews at all. Mm-hmm. And it were the Jeckies that kept it alive. It wasn't the reviews.
Ironically enough, seriously, I was just writing about Jekyll and Hyde and certainly mentioned you in the review because you may know that it's at North Shore Music Theater in Beverly.
I do know, with Constantine Maroulis, directed by Robert Cuccioli.
Yeah, so I went to their opening night, and I'm just writing about it now. And I don't say in this piece that the critics didn't like it. What I did say is this was the 11th time I've seen the show, wow. and I've never seen the audience do anything but go crazy at the show.
I have been to dozens of performances of that show, dozens of productions, different productions. Sure. I've never not seen the audience go nuts.
Nuts, absolutely. Yeah, and not because I'm talking to you. I mean, I have a paper trail saying that going way back.
I completely understand what you're saying because I have never myself seen it any other way. They never sit on their hands.
And yeah, it is true that most critics don't like it, but the fact remains that it is an audience favorite, and here it is. It's still being done.
Exactly.
So it's really quite wonderful that it's bringing a lot of people a lot of pleasure.
Exactly. I'm sort of going back a bunch of steps when you said that reviews and critics have had less influence over time, and I think that's true.
Yeah.
Is there a difference when you go to a show that you have never seen before it's a brand new show or a new playwright or something like that, and you don't know anything about where this has come from? Do you approach that any differently than you do saying a show you've seen a dozen times?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very important to take into consideration who you're dealing with. If it's a young playwright, you really want him or her to get every possible break, and you have to be very concerned about that. I mean, for example, a play opened on Broadway in 1993 called Twilight of the Golds by a young writer, and it got terribly unflattering reviews.
Was that Oliver Haley?
No, Jonathan, and his last name is blanking out on me now. But anyway, I said, what we have to remember is that Tennessee Williams' first play closed out of town. Mm-hmm. We have to remember that Arthur Miller's first play closed after 4 performances. Mm-hmm. And after that out-of-town closing, Tennessee Williams came up with The Glass Menagerie. And after that 4-performance flop, Arthur Miller came up with All My Sons. So as a result, we really have to be gentle and not really squelch careers, because a lot of people, one could argue, of course, that you got to have resilience in this business or else you aren't going to get anywhere. But I'm sure some people have given up because, indeed, the reviews have been so hostile. There's a very interesting story about Terrence Mcnally. His first play that he wrote from scratch was called In Things That Go Bump in the Night.
Right.
And there were 6 New York newspapers at that time, and all 6 said, this is putrid, this is awful, the worst thing that's ever happened, blah, blah, blah. So he assumed that that first performance was the last performance, and he went to the producer's office the next day, and he said to him, I guess we're closed, huh? And the producer said, no, we're not, and I'll tell you why. We have a little money left over. We didn't spend all the money we needed. And while I could send it back to the investors, and that would be a nice thing to do, I'll grant you, I've got to try an experiment that I really have to, I've been thinking about for a long time. Would people come to see this show if we charged $1? Now, tickets in those days were $6.90 for the best seat.
Right.
So this is an 84% discount. And more to the point, this is before there's any TKTS or anything like that. This is 1964. Anyway, so they announced that all tickets were going to be $1, and they sold out for the rest of the week. They still had a little money left. They said, let's try it again. In fact, we were going to ask for $2 on Friday and Saturday nights. And they sold out again. Now they were out of money. They had to close. But the experiment was there. Will people go see something if indeed the price is low enough, no matter how bad the reviews are? But here's the point. Terrence Mcnally said to me when I brought this up to him, and if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be the playwright I am today, because I saw full houses react the same way 15 times. I saw when I had them. I saw when I interested them. I saw when I lost them. And it was just fascinating. When nobody's there, you don't learn anything. He said, and when 15 times you see the same thing happening, you can't say, oh, the audience didn't get it. Well, the problem might have something to do with the writing, mightn't it?
Yes.
So as a result, that's what happened. And he really learned a lot, and he said he learned from his mistakes, and that's why his later plays became good. And certainly he's one of our most treasured playwrights. He's won Tony Awards. He's certainly done well both in plays and musicals. I mean, he's become a major writer.
Absolutely.
And it might not have happened had that producer not taken that very dramatic step.
An unusual step, I would say.
A very unusual step, you bet.
So you're also I would say a deeply studied theater historian, and would you say that your knowledge of theater history impacts the way you look at a show?
Oh, no question. How could it not? Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I have no interest in reading novels. I'm only interested in things that tell me more about theater. I only read research books on theater, biographies. I just got a biography of Ray Bolger in the mail, and I'm already starting reading it to look to see if I can get an article out of it. If not just a review, but an article dealing with certain facets of his career. He was in a musical called Where's Charlie, and I read a column for Music Theater International, which licenses Where's Charlie, so there might be some information there. He was also in By Jupiter, which got an album from Masterworks Broadway, and I do a column for them, so there might be a story there. So I'm only interested in reading things that tell me more about my field.
Do you have a particular genre you prefer?
You mean when I go to the theater?
Yeah,
do I
when
like
you
to
go,
play
do you prefer to see
or a comedy?
Exactly, comedy or a musical or a drama? Is it something that you prefer, or does it not matter to you?
Well, it's always, because I started in musical theater, that has always been the real passion. I have to admit that since musical theater doesn't sound like the musical theater I grew up with anymore, that I have less interest as time has gone on. But I'm still interested in going. But yes, while it used to be a case that I would be very upset if I missed a musical, it's not so much the case. I mean, I see them anyway, but I mean, if I were to miss a musical, it wouldn't be the end of the world, where there would have been a time where it would have been. So under those circumstances, yeah, plays have caught up in my interest, especially, people say, what are you looking forward to this season? In fact, nothing, because I'll get excited after I see a show, not before, because so many times they don't work out. The only thing, in the last few years, the only ones that have really excited me saying, oh, wow, tonight's the night, I can't wait to go, are plays by Martin McDonagh. The Irish playwright who writes very bizarre plays, but he has such a fertile imagination. And by the way, if you met him, he's the nicest, sunniest, happy-go-lucky guy, but I'm telling you, it all comes out in the writing, where people are murdered and, but he really interests me. So, so plays have caught up, and I look forward to them. And, comedies are few and far between. I mean, there used to be a time when comedies ruled Broadway, and things like Barefoot in the Park, Cactus Flower, The Voice of the Turtle. I mean, most of the long-run shows up until the 70s were straight plays, and musicals weren't, but that has changed tremendously, partly because of TV, because TV used to be rather demure. There's a big difference between Sex and the City and Father Knows Best.
Oh, yes.
So, as a result, it really is a case that because TV has caught up with essential, what used to be sex comedies on Broadway, they've disappeared. But the musical experience is really something you have to have in the theater. I mean, if you look at the movie A West Side Story, story, as wonderful as it is, when they finish the number America, suddenly they look at each other and they start laughing as if to say, wasn't that silly? Now, on a stage, it doesn't seem silly because the audience is applauding and they can ease back into what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons why people enjoy musicals on stage more than they do at the movies.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is, for your money, the best opening and the best closing of any show you've ever seen?
Well, there are so many that come to mind, but by far, I would think the best opening is Beautiful Girls in the Musical Follies, because it has emotion. This is a reunion of Showgirls. The theater that they used to perform in is being torn down, so as a result, they're having one last reunion, and they all wear the sashes they had when they were in the show. So some of them are coming down the stairs. The show was produced in 71, and when it's revived, it's still set in 71. Mm-hmm. So these old women in their orthopedic shoes and their very unsexy dresses are coming down the stairs to the melody they used to come down to. Beautiful girls. They're not beautiful girls anymore. As we hear in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and we all lose our charms in the end. And it's true of these ladies, too, that they come down the stairs, and some of them have to hold on to the railing because they're very infirm. One has a cane, that type of thing. So that's very emotional to see the beautiful girls aren't beautiful anymore, and yet they're very happy to be there and have that recollection of what they used to be and how much fun they used to have when they were young. So that's the best opening number, I think, of all time. So in terms of the best closing number, it's a tie, and both of them were written by Frank Lesser, one for Guys and Dolls and one for How to Succeed. Right. And the 11 o'clock number, as they're called, because shows used to end at 11 when they used to start at 8:30. So Sit Down, You're Rockin' the Boat is a great number, and so is Brotherhood of Man, which I think I prefer a little, actually, in How to Succeed. So those come to mind immediately. The best first act curtain may very well be And I Am Telling You I Am Not Going from Dreamgirls.
Oh, yes.
In which a woman claims she's not going, but she will be going whether she likes it or not. And then the way she's whisked off the stage at the very end, as we see her replacement in her role, is very dramatic. And ironically enough, the best second act opening is a show that nobody knows. It's for a show called Abyssinia, and you're pardoned if you've never heard of it. Yeah. But this is a musical about a religious community, and something truly terrible happens. I don't remember what, but something truly terrible happens that makes people suddenly not believe in God. And in the second act, the preacher, who has certainly inspired them all through their lives, sings a song called Picking Up the Pieces. And I'm telling you, it's amazing how it turns everybody around. They start believing again. It's a miracle how well the song works. And that's what immediately comes to mind for a second act opening, not that you asked that question. But you might have.
I very well might have. I did not even, wasn't going there, but I think I'm glad you said it, you know. Tell me about your workspace. Do you have anything particular you must have around you in order to work?
No, just the computer and my own library here. I rarely have to go outside these four walls to do research. I remember when I was doing the book on the biggest hit of the season, the biggest flop of the season, I did have to go to the library to find the original London reviews of Les Miserables, which were pretty miserable. I don't know if you know that, but
I did not know that.
Yeah, it got terrible reviews, and ironically enough, it got great reviews here, but it had been established as a hit by that point in time. Again, the public made its statement. They weren't going to stay away from the show just because the critics didn't like it. So I didn't have any London reviews, so I had to go up to Lincoln Center Library, which is only 10 blocks from my house, and do the research. But everything else is here. I mean, I have a lot of stuff here, and usually I can find everything here. And if not, of course, there is that internet that certainly helps as well. It's much easier to be a writer now than it used to be. Much easier.
It's sure, because you don't have to go to a library usually to get what you need.
Right.
So, Peter, we've been talking for a good hour here, and this has just been spectacularly wonderful information. And I'm wondering, in all of your experiences, do you have an oddball, a weird, a quirky, funny story that from all your showbiz experiences?
Well, one that comes to mind involves my play Adam's Gifts, which was done in New Hampshire. And I went up there, and it has a cast of 5. And 4 people are saying to me, oh, it's such an honor to meet you. I love your writing. I have your books. Would you autograph? All the kind of stuff. But the guy who's playing the lead, is giving me the cold shoulder. And I get it. I understand. You know, hey, I'm the big star here. I'm not bowing down to any guy from New York. You know, so I get it. It's fine, you know, no problem. But anyway, I promised to take the cast out to dinner between the two performances on Saturday. So we go out, and I'm arranging with the waiter to, I'll pay the check, blah, 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 that type of thing. And when I go back to the table, the only seat left is across from this taciturn gentleman's wife, and he's there too. So I sit down, and I figure, okay, I'll talk to the wife. So tell me about you. Well, we've been married 42 years. Oh, isn't that wonderful? I'm so glad. That's great. Do you have any children? And she says, yes, we have two, a son and a daughter. I said, well, tell me about them. She said, well, our son's a CPA. I said, oh, that's wonderful. And then the guy speaks for the first time. He said, yeah, and our daughter's an actress, and you gave her a lousy review at New Jersey Rep last year. What are the odds? 362 miles away. What are the odds?
And what did you do?
Well, I said, did I? And I left it at that. I went back to the theater. I had to see another show at that theater where this actress had appeared, and I told the story to the people who run the theater. You know, they didn't know where I was going with this story. Why is he telling us this story? And and they said, well, who's the actress? And I gave the actress's name, and they actually went, ugh! So they didn't like her either. So I don't think I was so out of bounds. You know, I mean, the reaction was just amazing. They cringed in horror, like they saw the blob coming. So it was really something.
Oh,
but you know, on the other hand, I certainly remember when you mentioned the one act play that was done in San Juan Capistrano. So I got on the plane to go to Los Angeles. And I've been used to going to a lot of small places like Dayton and Wichita where there are commuter planes, but this was to Los Angeles, and it didn't even occur to me when I put my luggage up in the overhead compartment that it was the first-class section. I really shouldn't be there. But all right, let me see if I can get away with this. Maybe I should turn it around because my luggage tag is sticking out with my name, and you know how it is in first class. They come around and say, Mr. Felicia, what will you have, the caviar, et cetera. So I knew that I might not get away with it, but I took a chance, and I went back and sat in my row 25, and suddenly I heard, well, Peter Filichia come up to the front of the plane. I thought, all right, they got me. I went up, and I said, yeah, I'm he. And they said, yeah, this woman wants to talk to you. And she turned to me and said, I saw your luggage tag. I saw your name. I want to thank you for the nice review you gave me at Goodspeed last year. So that's the other side of the coin.
Well, your reputation precedes you one way or the other, doesn't it?
One way or the other, right.
So do you have one good, solid piece of advice or a tip that you can give to whoever, whether they're up-and-coming critics and reviewers or up-and-coming performers or writers, playwrights, whatever, that will help them to maybe become better at it or to actually get their foot in the door or whatever?
This is going to sound really crazy, but I really believe this is a very good way to go.
I love crazy.
I think people just starting out should really pay attention to memorial services. Now, when you go to a memorial service, you're going to hear a lot of people get up and tell why the person was extraordinary. You might learn something from hearing what makes a person extraordinary. And then, afterwards, at the little brunch, lunch, whatever they have, go and mingle, meet people. That's how, it has so much to do with being at the right place in the right time. Nothing beats that, and meeting people. Just as, as I said, because I walked up the right set of stairs when somebody I knew was coming down, it changed my life. Mm-hmm. Similarly speaking, you might very well meet somebody at that reception, and you will benefit from it. As I say, it's a little macabre, I grant you, to take advantage of somebody who just died. I'm not saying you have to say to the person, oh, I loved him dearly, though you might have seen his or her work, so it's entirely possible. But I do recommend going to memorial services, and I go quite often. You might meet me there.
Now you're talking about memorial services for people in the business.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I don't think you have to go to an upholsterer's or anything.
No,
like
that's
that,
what I was wondering. I thought maybe you were talking about going to any memorial service.
No. Anybody in the business. They're pretty well advertised. I mean, online on the sites that deal with theater, I think you'll have no problem finding that a service will be held at the Majestic Theater on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Get there. Really, it's a good idea.
I was going to say I would have never thought of that. I think that's a brilliant idea because, in fact, there will be a weight of populace from the theater there.
Sure.
And that's a really,
sure.
It's a really clever idea. Peter, this has been just a great joy. This has been spectacularly fun. And I'm so glad
I had a good time, too.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you stopped by today at StoryBeat and we were able to have a chat. And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great episodes to you. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.